Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. A lot to get to on this episode. Free agency just days away. So we're going to, of course, get our takes on the upcoming free agent class and the frenzy that is due to us sometime early next week. We also got some combine cleanup to do. Talk about the guys that did well, maybe not so well at the combine, how that reflects in their dynasty value and also their best ball and redraft value as well. And of course, we got to talk a little bit of DraftKings best ball. That's right. DraftKings already has their early bird best ball contests out there. I've been deep in the weeds on those, having a lot of fun. So we're gonna tap into that to lead off the show. Quick message from our friends over at DraftKings.
It's the off season, but on DraftKings, football never sleeps. Early bird best ball is back. Get a head start on the season and compete for a share of $1 million in total prizes before the rest of the field even jumps in. Are you new to best ball? It's the easiest way to get in on the action without the weekly grind. Draft once, and that's it. Each week, your top scores automatically count. No roster moves, no weekly management. Just build your squad and let it ride all season long. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app and draft your early bird best ball lineup for a shot at a share of $1 million in prizes. Drafts stay open until the season kicks off, so now's the time to jump in. You draft it, we crown it, so sign up now using the link in the description below to take your shot at a share of $1 million in prizes on DraftKings Early Bird Best Ball Contest. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most states. Restrictions apply. See terms at DraftKings.com. Sponsored by DraftKings.
And we're back. All right, so let's get into some best ball details here when it comes to DraftKings. Again, they've got contests out there at a big, wide variety of entry fees, price points. So available to pretty much anybody out there that wants to get a little bit of a head start on best ball season now that we're into March. And again, a lot of things are going to change next week. A lot of things have already changed with the results of the combine rolling in. But I want to kind of focus first on the free agency detail. So some guys whose values are kind of twisting in the wind right now. I think Kenneth Walker, to me, really kind of stands out because he's such a important piece of the fantasy puzzle that this coming season. Had such a incredible run during the playoffs this past year, and obviously Super Bowl MVP. Now it looks like he's going to test the market as he should, and whether or not that's a great idea for the Seahawks, that's almost like a topic for a whole other show and entirely. With Zach Charbonnet suffering his knee injury during the postseason as well. It's like, what are they going to do without Kenneth Walker? But it seems like he's going out there. There's going to be a lot of teams that are in need of a free agent running back. I think that's compounded by the fact that maybe this isn't the best rookie running back class incoming. So I think the free agents probably, felt good about the results of last weekend's combine. But there's also a team that I saw rumored that would really be a fly in the ointment for us in the fantasy community. That would be the New York Giants, the New York Football Giants, apparently having some linkage to Kenneth Walker. So right now, Walker's kind of like a mid-third round guy. I think when we were unpacking my draft last week, Mario, he actually slid a little bit past ADP, and that was before these rumors started flying a little bit. But what's your take on Walker right now? And if he were to go somewhere like the Giants, where we already have a guy that, we rank as a top 50 player in Cam Skattebo, what would that do to the respective values there?
That's a tough one, I think, especially because of Skattebo's injury. I honestly haven't really engaged the subject since it happened because it was just too disheartening, traumatizing to think about. So I kind of tried to bury it in my mind. And I guess I'd still kind of like to do that. I'd like to just kind of assume a good case scenario of some sort for Skattebo, but I don't really know. That was a really bad injury. So perhaps some amount of the Giants' potential interest in Kenneth Walker is a little bit acknowledging concern, maybe even something worse than concern for Scadaboo. I'd like to believe, though, that they're instead just sort of saying we need to make it an extreme strength position. But it would be an extreme strength to have Tyrone Tracy as your third running back, in my opinion. I think Scadaboo at once is clearly better than Tyrone Tracy, and yet Tyrone Tracy is probably, at the very least, a really good running back too. Maybe a little bit overqualified as one, so I think he would certainly be overqualified as a running back 3. Perhaps a scenario where Walker signs with the Giants is one where they trade Tracy. I don't really know. I just think it would be a lot at one position, and therefore there's just kind of a lot of ways this could break, especially depending on how Scadaboo's recovery goes. Because in my opinion, if Scadaboo's fully healthy again, he's the kind of problem Walker can't make go away. To the point that I'm not convinced Walker is a better player than Scadaboo if Scadaboo's fully healthy. And I really doubt unfortunately for me, I doubt I'm going to draft much Kenneth Walker wherever he goes in free agency, because at these ADPs, I think it's just too high. I think he's overrated based on one game that people there was like a motivated reasoning going into the Super Bowl in a lot of the fantasy industry, because people were whining all year about like they should give the ball in certain places, especially because they touted him a lot and they drafted him a lot themselves. They were saying like, this is bull crap. They got to put Zach Charbonnet on the bench. He's one of the most inefficient runners in the league. No, he isn't. You just don't understand football, and you're trying not to understand it because your reasoning is motivated. You're trying to see things a certain way, and those people have a lot of media influence, and they've, I think, permeated the public consciousness enough that it's showing up in that ADP you mentioned. To me, Kenneth Walker is a thought beginning in the 5th round. In the 3rd, I just feel like I can find something better.
Yeah, in the 3rd round, so your opportunity cost is basically like, him versus like a Bucky Irving, who, I think I saw something where Sean Tucker is not going to be tendered. So
yeah, they're not keeping Rashad White either. So I'd like Bucky Irving better as a value for those reasons, but for Bucky's sake, they should not try to give him 350 carries or whatever it is they're thinking of.
No, so all of a sudden, one of my like end game darlings of Sean Tucker, that certainly kind of goes out the window a little bit, because I thought him as like an RB2 for Tampa behind Bucky Irving would have been like a real kind of like hidden nice value that you could have gotten pretty late in your drafts. Now that doesn't seem to be the case, but other 3rd round running backs in that running, you got Josh Jacobs. You got Bryce Hall, who looks like he's going to be returning to the Jets. And
yeah, I'll take Bryce over Kenneth Walker. He's a better player than him. Sorry.
I do agree with that. I've never been like the biggest Ken Walker guy either. Motivated. I had a lot of Charbonnet this past year. Travis Etienne, I think is the other kind of primo free agent to be running back. So your thoughts on him, and what I think there's been some linkage between him and the Chiefs. It sounds like a little bit, if he doesn't go back to Jacksonville. So if he were to go to KC, where would that, in your mind, kind of shift Etienne's draftable slot? Right now he's going tail end of the 3rd, early 4th round.
That also sounds a little expensive for Etienne, in my opinion, but I'm willing to pay more for Etienne than I am Kenneth Walker. So if I can get Etienne cheaper generally than I can get Kenneth Walker, I find it an acceptable purchase, or at least a preferable one to the first option. And I wonder if I don't know what to expect for where Etienne's ADP might go from here. I guess if he signed with the Chiefs, it would probably get a lot higher, wouldn't it? Like, it would probably push for like the 2nd round or something. And I don't know if I like that either. In part because I don't actually have the faith in the Chiefs that I used to, by default. Before, it would be like, oh yeah, the place where Damian Williams had 500 yards in 2 playoff games or whatever. It's like, yeah, that Etienne on that team would go completely insane. Etienne on that Chiefs team would run for 2,000 yards. But in today's Chiefs reality, we have Mahomes coming off the ACL. The whole the whole thing might have been figured out, like whatever Andy Reid, whatever code he cracked, that initially helped spark this dynasty, this little dynasty that the Chiefs had. It seems like the tricks don't work anymore. And while I won't bet against Mahomes in the long term, I still, without flinching, will pick him as the top quarterback in the league. It's not a thought to me. The Chiefs, at the very least, it seems like they have things they need to figure out. And I worry that Andy Reid's reaching the Chiefs version of the end days of his Philadelphia tenure, where it's like, you're kind of just screwing up enough that we're going to have to actually get rid of you at some point. And Andy Reid is not the best coach ever. He can get there. And if the Chiefs have another year of having to figure things out, I don't know that it would be that much different of a circumstance for Etienne than if he had stayed in Jacksonville. I'd like to think it would be, and I guess the offensive line would be better. I still don't think the Jacksonville offensive line is that great, especially at the interior. So the Chiefs' offensive line was a kind of a mess last year, but they did have some injuries and they were waiting on some prospects to kind of come of age. So I guess, yeah, the Chiefs would be a better situation. It's just, I'm not getting my hopes up for like the Damian Williams thing, even though I absolutely would if the Chiefs were the same team they were 4 years ago.
Yeah, it feels like, there was a stretch, right, but for the Patriots where they went almost 10 years without winning the Super Bowl, but they obviously made the Super Bowl a couple times in that span in 2007 and 2011, and were kind of routinely making deep playoff runs. But there was like I think when you're talking about the Chiefs, the only real like modern comparison would be like, how close are they tracking to what the Patriots were able to do in their heyday with Brady and Belichick. And there was sort of a reconfiguring of things during that period between their Super Bowl wins. And I wonder if the Chiefs are going to be able to navigate that with the same level of competency that the Patriots were, 10 plus years ago. And I'm a little bit skeptical on that, because I feel more so that Reid is maybe a little bit running out of gas more so than say Belichick was at that stage. Not to say that Belichick isn't fully out of gas right now, but that's a totally different story. But yeah, so I mean, if Etienne were to go to the Chiefs, I think there would still be that market reaction where he all of a sudden cracks probably like the top 25, if not the top 30, as far as the DraftKings ADP is concerned. And that gets a little bit tricky. But then, there's also this dynamic right now. I think it's a little bit of a reaction to the way that last year went, where it was just such a golden year to invest early in running back. And there were so many landmines at either receiver or even at tight end a little bit in the case of Bowers, even though he wasn't even that bad. All told, he was still a top 10 tight end. But, running back was safer last year. So running back is therefore getting pushed up in the market this year. And so like you run into a situation where even if we kind of a reshuffling of the deck of like the pecking order of these running backs, there's still that sort of cliff that I'm identifying once you get past Etienne, because then you get down to like Javonte Williams in the mid-4th. And then you've got Scadaboo, who again, we have these lingering concerns with, not just injury, but also if the Giants kind of turn that into more of a committee, if they do add Kenneth Walker. And then you've got RJ Harvey, who apparently seems to be at a little bit of risk of getting some serious competition in that Denver backfield, and Quinshon Judkins, who's also coming off of a pretty rough injury late in the season as well. So it's not a great year to be like, I'm going to play bully ball with receivers and tight end in the early part, and then just, attack the running back position with volume, because you're running out of guys with that sort of like easy projection for, 250 plus carries.
Yeah. And I think as much as you can do the thing where you say this guy in round 3 or 4 is a better value than this guy at the same position in whatever 4 or 5 or 6, at running back, you might not want to try to choose between the two as much as plan on taking both. So in this case, like, I like RJ Harvey despite those concerns. Like at that price in DraftKings is PPR scoring, I think RJ Harvey in the 5th round pretty much cannot hurt you, even like no matter who they add. But that's not a good reason to also fade the entirety of the 2 rounds before it, because I'd rather have at least 2, if not 3, flex or better, running back 2 or better type running backs than trying to see how there's always like the hero running back strategies, zero running back strategies. Those are valid, of course, but as a general median range approach, I would rather not try to go so thin at running back.
No, so I want to be leaving probably like at least the first 4 rounds with 2 running backs. If I can slip one of these other guys in, but again, the problem, the tension in the market right now is such that a lot of these running backs that are surefire things, the price is full right now. It's third round or earlier in pretty much all their cases, and then you're getting a little bit more speculative the further down that you go.
So yeah, I guess I like Etienne and Harvey kind of a little bit more than like Walker Harvey as a tandem there, but something like that I should probably prepare to pay those types of prices as opposed to, like you said, like the 5th round type version last year's. Like those days are just kind of gone.
Yeah, so that's sort of our meta analysis of the running back market right now as free agency bears down on us. I guess last question before we move on, like if you're drafting this weekend, and you were kind of like specking on these guys, are you trying to get Etienne at the current price now, or are you gonna wait? And I think I know your answer on Kenneth Walker, but like how with like those potential free agent dominoes, are these guys that are twisting in the wind a little bit more so guys that you're just gonna wait for the dust to settle on, or try to attack aggressively in these next couple days before we see the movement?
A guy like Etienne, I think it makes sense to go now, just because assuming we were reasoning through it correctly, I do think there's a good basis to suspect he'll push for that 25, if not 18 overall kind of range if he signs with the Chiefs. So, and on the other hand, it almost doesn't matter if Etienne signs with a non-Chiefs team. It's not as if he's going to get much cheaper than the late 3rd or the early 4th anyway. He might get expensive too if he goes to some other team. So Etienne, I like. Walker in the 3rd sounds maxed out to me. I could be wrong. If as much as I think that Kenneth Walker is pretty clearly overrated, I think if he goes to a certain place that dictates a certain workload, then of course, then it doesn't even really matter how good he is. If you're pushing 300 carries, if you're going to get 50 or 60 catches, you're worth a 1st round pick in fantasy almost certainly. And so if he ends up on some team that gives him that level of workload, then I would end up wishing I had taken Kenneth Walker in the 3rd. But if he ends up going to some team that's saying that comes out and says almost expressly, we're going to do what the Seahawks did. This is our Zach Charbonnet over here. This guy's our Zach Charbonnet. If like that comes out, then Walker might slip a little bit from his current price because there's a lot of fan fiction right now in the meantime proliferating.
Yeah, I think that where he's getting drafted right now, like what the market is saying is that he's going to sign somewhere where he's like the runaway RB1. And, again, if he goes somewhere like the Giants, it's definitely not the case. And therefore, I think it might be a little bit better to wait on if you're going to draft Walker, if you're taking him right now, you're likely taking him at his peak. So I
thought I saw that the Jags might have been a little linked to him too. I don't think there is a runaway workload either. I think it would have been more like, I don't know, the Texans or something. If the Texans had, not to change the subject to another recent news thing, but if the Texans hadn't traded for David Montgomery and had signed Kenneth Walker, then I might have been like, oh, I wish I drafted him in the 3rd round because I know they're just going to do the Joe Mixon thing with him.
Yeah, that's a good call. We'll have to get to the Texans a little bit later on in the show, as that's one of the few kind of moves that we know for sure is being made with them going after David Montgomery. But that's going to round it out for our DraftKings best ball segment. Again, go check out DraftKings. They've got tons of early bird best ball. It's March. It's a beautiful time to be drafting right now. And again, free agency is going to be crazy. So I feel like the next couple of days is a really fun time where you can speculate and maybe get some pretty nice closing line value on some players before their ADPs skyrocket. We're going to transition over to talk about the combine a little bit. And again, if you're listening to us here on the live stream or however you listen on your podcasts, check us out at rotowire.com. We've got tons of great written content as well. It's peak of baseball draft season too. So our baseball guys are bar none the best out there. So definitely going to want to see them, and you definitely going to want to be signed up. So you can get 15% off any RotoWire subscription. You just go to rotowire.com and you use that code YouTube15. Bada bing, bada boom, 15% off. All right. I just posted a article about the combine, particularly when it came to receivers. If I did this for every single position in one article, I think my head would have exploded. But I am going to endeavor to do this type of thing for running backs and tight ends as well. But basically, if you're following along here on the live stream, what I did, folks, was I built something that's like a composite athletic score for these wide receivers, and I took the sample from 2019 all the way through this past year's combine, and just kind of assigned overall athletic score. And so in some cases, like my initial run, it had Matthew Golden a little bit way too high, but that was because the one test that he did, he was like a 95th percentile performer. So I tried to give guys a little bit of extra credit if they participated in more drills and did well in those drills, and did a slight penalty if they opted out of a bunch of those drills. My methodology still kind of in the laboratory, but I felt like this was still enough to publish and to discuss, of course. And I think like the really interesting thing to me is the guys at the receiver position who score really well in this. It's not exactly littered with stars, right? I mean, like,
No.
we'll have to see what Jeff Caldwell becomes, but he wasn't on a lot of people's radars before last weekend.
He cannot play.
In fact, like the best receiver who actually like tested extremely well, it was Jamar Chase. And you kind of have to go a little bit further down to find like these stars with athletic scores that may not rate all that great. I actually put a little table together with the top 10 receivers as far as their ADP goes and their athletic score. Some guys were pro day, but Puka, he wasn't like, jumping or doing crazy things at his pro day. JSN, same deal with his pro day. CeeDee Lamb was like a fine athlete by the combine standards. Amon-Ra famously kind of below average. Justin Jefferson, Drake London, I guess, didn't participate. Pickens, he was still like, I still don't think that he was like his fully himself going into that combine, about a year removed from his ACL injury. And Nico Collins scored well, of course, but that sort of helped him get drafted. He wasn't like a lock to go in like the day 2 range before that combine. So that certainly helped his case. But yeah, long sort of preamble to say that I'm not saying that the combine doesn't matter, but I think it more matters on like the left side than the right side. If you're looking at a chart where like the guys that are absolutely blowing it up at the combine, like they're not always going to be great, but you need to have like a certain like kind of baseline threshold to establish when it comes to athleticism. Like, very rarely are you going to get like a receiver who does anything that also runs a 4.7. But, the kind of common theme of these guys is like they're running in the 4.5s in a lot of instances. And I made this other chart. Maybe too many visuals I'm throwing out there at once, but like these are the guys with the yellow dots are the guys with the fastest 40s over the last few years. And then the guys with the blue dots are the best performers in terms of fantasy production from last year. None of those guys with the blue dots really were insane, 4.3 type of guys.
Yeah. First of all, before I get into like the meta, whatever, the tool, we could call it like a tool, right? Or something like that you've made.
I'd say so.
A model that you've working with. We got to figure out an acronym. It's going to be hard because we have to use your name. we're gonna have to find a J and an H word. It's all got to fit together in an athleticism themed clunky title, and we got to think of that. Start spreading that. Get less Spark, more of the John metric,
Yes.
which is better. But yeah, it's a complicated subject. This big subject of wondering about the meaning of the combine and the role of athleticism, specifically, I guess, especially with the fantasy production concern, because that's all we truly care about in these venues. I think it's easy to get swept up in a variety of different theories. I consider my viewpoint on it kind of moderate in a way, which normally I think is a label people misapply in other contexts. I mean, truly moderate in that, like, I'm trying to keep everything in mind, and it's not to me true to say the combine doesn't matter or that it does, just like it doesn't determine anything on its own either. For me, it's a multifaceted process to evaluate prospects, and the athleticism is one component. It's like you have to make like a new composite grade for prospects that also involves a consideration of the production. And not to say that every time production and athleticism are both present, the player therefore is good, because Paris Campbell, one example, he was productive at Ohio State, great athletic testing, still didn't turn out to be anything. Dante Moncrief was, I think, a guy who was kind of in that category at Mississippi or wherever he played. So you will get guys who are both really athletic and really productive who turn out to be duds in the NFL. But the thing about most of these total duds that you mentioned, John, these really fast guys who did nothing, they also did nothing in college.
Yes, that's a good point. So I'll pull up the 40 for example. So like Anthony Schwartz, track guy, amazing sprinter, and someone who like always scared me when he was at Auburn as a Georgia fan, because it's like, what if he breaks the big one? But just he wasn't a great football player; he's just a great athlete. Or Tyquan Thornton has had a little bit of difficulty, although he was at least like pretty productive at Baylor. You move on down this list as far as great 40 times are concerned. I don't know who
John,
else
like Bryce
kind of
Ford
like
Wheaton.
idea.
It's like he had such an insane composite grade, and you look at his production at West Virginia, and it's like, okay, well, why didn't he do anything? And the answer is because he didn't have the football skill. He didn't have a sufficient football skill level for his athleticism to be useful. It was a totally moot consideration. It just didn't get onto the field. It's like the difference between in baseball, like raw power, like basically like how much can this guy just beat the crap out of something with a stick, versus the in game power, which is like, can he hit a ball? And if he can't, then it doesn't matter how strong he is. There's no power. See,
exactly. So like you get the I guess Joey Gallo at least had like a couple good seasons, but he's always like that monster raw power, but the game power could be a little bit tricky.
Let me one up you there.
Please. Yeah, that's a much better example.
Everybody listening to this podcast knows who Sully Matias is.
No question about it. I'm still holding out hope for my guy, Big Christmas, Jonkenzie Noel. I think is in the Orioles camp now. I couldn't believe the Guardians just threw him out with the trash. But anyway, you can hear more actual baseball analysis on our baseball podcast feeds. But yeah, I think that's a great point when it comes to the 40 in particular. And yeah, like this list is not littered with guys who were like 80, 100 catch type of guys at the college level with a bunch of Worthy was someone that we really put under the microscope when he ran the 4.21, because like there was a production variable to him, but there were also like other concerning signs and things like, well, he is also like very small. Like what's the success rate on guys with that particular frame, and they need to run as fast as Worthy does in order to amount to much, and things like that. And he had drop issues that haven't exactly gone away either.
Right. So to kind of like circle back a little bit to the Paris Campbell issue, right? Like what do you do with these guys who both put up really big numbers and are very athletic? It gets harder at this point. I fell for it in both the cases of Paris Campbell and Dante Moncrief. So I'd like to not do that the next time around. And best I can tell is it won't shock anyone that in Paris Campbell's case, it was, well, he just kind of was a screen merchant. So that end around merchant. They would do that thing where he's basically taking a jet sweep, but because the quarterback technically was leaning like a half of a degree forward when they let the ball go, that it counted as a pass. So that was a lot of the production that Paris Campbell had. It was kind of like dubious production, especially in hindsight, because you could have said like, this is not, you can't emulate this in the NFL. So what is he going to do then? And there's no real obvious reason why Paris Campbell couldn't have just adjusted his game. I think that's a thing a lot of players have to do, is like they'll also reach that point where it's like, this thing that worked in college so much, it's just over now. You're just going to have to find some other way to do it. And the best players do in those cases. And in Paris Campbell's case, I guess in hindsight, we would say he didn't have the route running acumen. He didn't have the route running, like the spatial intelligence aspect of it. Because clearly the movement part he can do, but it's like the timing, the innate, the sixth sense aspect of route running he apparently didn't have. He was always just kind of like running himself into coverage. So in a case like Worthy's, that's an example. That's a kind of like a good opportunity to look at that too, because especially if you just looked at his true freshman year, you would have, and you also knew about his track background, you would have said like, this is the first overall pick. This is going to be the first overall pick. There's no doubt about it. He's going to be the most coveted wide receiver talent since whatever Megatron, and it wouldn't have been a crazy thing to suspect at the time. However, as the sample size got bigger over the next 2 years, we saw Worthy was forced into situations where he could not maintain that same effect on the game. And so you have to kind of, you have to try to keep an eye out for that, where the sort of like, I think we saw a little bit of that with Casey Concepcion too, between his first and his second year. You have to sort of ask yourself like, well, what if this fails? What if this fails? What if this is a disappointment? And in the case of a guy like Worthy's, I think we can have a little bit of, not like a true pessimism for him, but we don't need to assume that just because he produced at a notable level at a notable age and has all this athleticism that he's therefore going to improve on any particular basis. Like, he might be maxed out because his issue is something pretty straightforward. As you said, it's like he's the physicality, holding onto the ball. He's just not very good at it, at least right now. If it changes, a lot could change with it. But until then, we don't really have any basis to assume things will just get better for no particular reason.
Yeah, I mean, we have a couple of years in now, and you're just sort of like, he's got speed, like, what to draw the direct, Chiefs comparison, where it's like, okay, like he's supposed to be the Tyreek Hill or something, he's supposed to like add this downfield element. And, you've made good points on just like how defenses have changed and adjusted to kind of take away the deep ball a little bit. But like Worthy's speed, like the 4.21 speed should be something where like it kind of neutralizes whatever like defensive formation you're out there. But it feels like Worthy in his case, and I could be wrong, I don't have his ADOT right in front of me, but it feels like the downfield targets, like he doesn't generate them whatsoever, whether it's
he runs into the shell.
See?
Yeah, they just catch him in the net every time. And I think if I was in charge, if I was like assigned to the Chiefs to make Worthy get to the next level, I would suggest he should add some weight. I don't think he's got to be like 165, something like that. And if he was 180, okay, he's not going to run a 4.21. But what's so bad about a 4.28 or whatever if you're 180 pounds? That's a little bit more you can work with. That speed, you keep adding more and more speed to no effect. Like it doesn't matter how fast you get. It just, you've hit this dead end, this diminished return. There's nothing to be done about it except to work away from it. And in that sense, I think it's like you got to start finding ways to attack parts of the field that you didn't previously. One reason why might be you kind of just get knocked out of the frame. You get ragdolled all the time. You can't go and fight at the catch point because you just get slapped away at the rim every time. So if Worthy could get a little bigger, kind of work on his catch point physicality, I think then he could kind of unlock a whole new world of possibility. But yeah, right now he's just kind of figured out.
Yeah, so there needs to be a counterpunch that he's going to be throwing in order to really make a progression and kind of get to that level that the Chiefs and fantasy players alike were kind of hoping and
Tyreek
expecting.
Hill, by the way, was 180 or 185 at 5'8".
Yeah,
like
so he was still like
not
a running
string
back.
bean. Yeah,
Not at all. So yeah, there was like an inherent difference there. You just wish the 4-2-1 is so cool to watch. You just like you throw it deep, man. Just let see what happens.
I gotta
But yeah,
say though,
he just gets
I
caught
think
in the net.
especially I think in hindsight, it's a little bit of a 7-on-7 cultural degeneration event, because what's up with these 160-pound receivers? Come on, knock it off. Stop. And they're getting these receivers. They're pre-selecting more of these athletes who are incredibly skinny because it's harder to jam them in 7-on-7. Give me a break. It's not real football. Just like, before this in the 2000s or whatever, the skinniest receiver in the league was Todd Pinkston. And even he would be like a 43rd percentile weight guy over the past 5 years.
Yeah, it'd be like a monster compared
Run
to
your
some of
40
these.
at 180 or at least 175 or something. Otherwise it doesn't count anymore.
Be honest with us here. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Let's see here. So let's go ahead and scale this conversation to I hated how I said that. Let's move the conversation to look at this year's class. And we just kind of established a more overarching like theme and that we're noticing with fantasy producers versus these standout guys at the combine. And I think we have an interesting group of participants from this year's combine that we can get into. I feel like I don't have everybody, but I've got 13 guys from this week's combine to get into. And we're talking about production and that being an important thing. Where if your athleticism is great, but the production's not there, then I'm going to inherently like not have a ton of trust. So let's talk a little bit about Caldwell, just because he did stand out so much, and there's, I guess, a sort of optimistic way you can look at things for Caldwell in the sense that he started out at Lindenwood in the Ohio Valley Conference, and then he moved up to Cincinnati this past year, and I think he had like 8 touchdowns on 32 catches. We like that, but his catch rate was abysmal and well below team baseline. So I'm worried that he's not worth much more than like a speculative end of your rookie draft type of guy. But even then, I'm probably going to lean more towards a guy with some actual, production to his game and more promising production. I think that translates than say Caldwell, who is just all tools. I think his best case scenario is sort of an Isaac Tesla, essentially.
Yeah, I feel pretty safe in assuming Caldwell won't play more than something like 25 snaps in the NFL if he even is active for a single game in his career. He is a crazy athlete, no doubt about it. The problem is we have seen this before. There's nothing new about a Jeff Caldwell. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of Jeff Caldwells throughout NFL draft history that have they've generated a similar level of interest at the time. They're like, look how huge and fast this guy, look how he jumps so high, it's crazy. They disappeared all the same. No one remembers them really. And I think Caldwell's going to be the next one of that, because as you said, his production was just so brutal at Cincinnati. So he also, Jeff Caldwell was the 3rd leading receiver on the team. This junior Caleb Goody, who I don't know, maybe he'll be at the combine next year. He outproduced. He had more yardage than Caldwell in one less game than Caldwell played. So it's also annoying to me that Caldwell was at the combine instead of Cyrus Allen, who is pretty clearly the better receiver from that Cincinnati team.
True.
And Cyrus Allen was a productive player in college, not a star or anything, but I still think Cyrus Allen has a chance to be a wide receiver 3 type in the NFL, even though he didn't get invited to the combine because he was a productive true freshman at Louisiana Tech. The second year he was also productive there. he was not bad at Texas A&M. They just didn't really let him play. And then this last year with Cincinnati, Cyrus Allen was so much more productive than Jeff Caldwell in the same offense. And this is not a high baseline that Cincinnati had. 61.6% completed, 8.2 yards per attempt, and Caldwell still sank it. Like he was killing them. The 7.8 yards per target might not look that bad, but considering the catch rate was so bad, so much lower than an already low baseline. Caldwell, I think at best would be like a decoy type in the NFL, but I think more so he's going to be he's like a poor man's Dante Thornton.
So that's not something that we're super interested in. So again, this is just one of the lessons that we want to get out there. Essentially, is that just because Caldwell was insane at the combine does not necessarily mean that he's going to be someone that you're going to be needing to pay a lot of attention to in the NFL for your fantasy purposes. Of the other guys who I gave a little medal icon to, Bryce Lance and Deion Burks, they both tested well. What were your kind of thoughts on them going in and coming out of the combine?
That was Bryce Lance and Burks, you said?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, Bryce Lance is an interesting case, not least of which reason being he's Trey Lance's brother. But it almost directly leads you to the big concern with Bryce Lance, which is, all right, if he's 6'4", 440, and he can jump out of the gym, and he's Trey Lance's brother, and he doesn't play until his fourth year there, that's weird. That's sometimes that stuff can be explained. I mean, there, as I mentioned, like the last podcast, as we mentioned every so often, there is such thing as such an extreme outlier case like a Darren Waller that, like, yeah, sometimes a guy didn't produce for reasons that can be explained and reasons that now no longer exist. It's exceedingly generous, though, to look at how long it took Lance to get on the field at North Dakota State and say, oh, it's fine. It's probably he's probably a special teams gunner. But he is fast, and he's big. It's not like he's not running his 4.34 at 170 pounds. He's running it at 205 or whatever. So I'd imagine Bryce Lance will stick around the league. He should be a really good special teams player, if nothing else. Historically, guys who take as long to get on the field as a wide receiver as he did, especially at that level of competition, especially with the program probably looking for any reason to get him on the field as soon as possible because of his name, that's a lot that makes me skeptical of him being more like a wide receiver 5 type at the NFL level. And then Burks, it's largely the same ish. It's largely the same theme as the other guys, which is I just hate the production. I don't really care how fast and quick a receiver is if he puts up numbers like these, which by these numbers, I mean, at Purdue, he must have played at least 300 snaps and probably something more like 400, 500 his sophomore year. And he drew 29 targets at 5.1 yards per target. So he's not running real routes, and he still can't draw targets at a notable per snap rate. Like normally, if you're running at that 4-yard ADOT or whatever he must have been, you should be drawing a target every 5 snaps because of how primitive the route is and how easy it is to present a target on it. His third year at Purdue, the one that he played before he got to Oklahoma, those numbers are also kind of trash. His target rate, again, at a pretty low depth, is low. If assuming these snaps are correct figures, it's 92 targets on 857 snaps. I want that to be more like 120 for the kind of routes that he's running and for the year that the age level he would have been at that point. His fourth year, his first at Oklahoma, 5.7 yards per target. I know it's a small 5 games, but admittedly the target rate was better then. But it seems to me the story of Deion Burks' career has been like he understandably tantalizes these coaches with this incredible quickness and speed and hops that he has, but when they try to get on the ball, it just doesn't work. And they try to get on the ball, and it just keeps not working for 5 years, and that's where we're at with Burks.
Yep, the 5-year detail with like no real, like it was like kind of like manufactured at Purdue. Like you look at the team context, and it's like Purdue has been pretty bad these last few years, and I'd
rather have Berrien Brown than Deion Burks because at least Berrien Brown might return some kickoffs for a touchdown.
Yeah, like I wonder what happened with his 40, but
Might have added some weight because he was at 180 or higher, and maybe he's one of those like, well, if he was 170, it would have been a 426 or something.
right, right. And then looking at the guys who were kind of in the middle, I called them like the Goldilocks tier of this particular group, where it's like the production was good and the athleticism was good. I felt like Skyler Bell and Ted Hurst both kind of like checked those boxes. Bell kind of a later breakout, and I know that like this is just another kind of wrinkle that we have to deal with as draft analysts, because these guys are staying in school longer. So like the days of a true sophomore breakout that translates into a big junior year that turns into he an early declare, like it doesn't happen anymore. These guys make money in college now. So, and in the case of someone like Skyler Bell, like if he left Wisconsin to go to the draft after 3 years, he wouldn't, he'd be like selling insurance or something. So he needed those 2 years at UConn to kind of hone his craft more. And if anyone played college football DFS this past year, Skyler Bell was like the guy that you built your lineups around. Like you knew that he was going to get 15 targets.
He had such an awesome year.
He should have. They probably just gave it to Jeremiah Smith just because.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. But yes, you're right. It's a complicated case when you find one like Bell's, especially because there's such a whiplash between his 2023 production at Wisconsin, which was horrible, in a way that's difficult to explain. To be clear, he caught 38 of 60 targets. That's 4.9 yards per target at a really bad catch rate, 1 touchdown, 38 catches resulting in just 296 yards. So that's brutal. However, that was a relatively small sample, and certainly was that a Fickle year? Was that
2023 would have been Fickle's first year.
So yeah, we can probably forgive Skyler Bell if Luke Fickle kind of just made it hard for him to produce, especially because not only that Skyler Bell put up such huge numbers at UConn the next 2 years, both of them quality production, but especially the 2025 season. Skyler Bell's 2022 season at Wisconsin, before Fickle showed up and completely torched and bombed the Wisconsin football program, Skyler Bell had a really promising sophomore year, and that would have been if he had a junior year more like his sophomore year. There's a chance Skyler Bell would have been in the NFL a year ago, because in 2022 Skyler Bell was 30 of 54 targets for 444 yards and 5 touchdowns on 625 snaps. So for a second year receiver to do that at Wisconsin, that's pretty good. That's about as good as a second year receiver does by Wisconsin standards. And then Fickle showed up, and it's right. Only that fifth year where it all looks bad for Bell, and then he also puts up the quality combine workout. So it's a complicated case. There's certain rules that if you apply them to Bell, they can lead you to the conclusion that like, oh, he sucks because he didn't do this by this year, and the outcomes for that query is these are all bad players. It's like, yeah, fair enough, but as you were saying, John, certain paradigms are going to kind of the past are going to dissolve in light of this transfer, the COVID 6-year thing, like all that stuff is creating a little bit different of an ecosystem than we used to have. And you're going to have to look more at the anecdotal stuff, like in Bell's case, because if you don't, you could easily look at that third year and think like, oh no, this is a red flag. And it's more so, no, Luke Fickle is a red flag for whoever he's coaching.
Yep. So yeah, sometimes it does take, the team context microscope to kind of uncover why exactly things unfolded the way that they did. But obviously he found greener pastures in
I'm excited for Hurst,
Connecticut.
So I was saying before the combine, Ted Hurst's production and the way that he the parts of the field that he ran in at Georgia State, it kind of looks like Nico Collins stuff in the event. And I thought it was a long shot at the time. It's not often that you see Georgia State guys or that level of competition in general. It's not often you see them show up to the combine and be one of the best athletes there. But that's what Ted Hurst did, and they're listing him at 6'4", 206 now. 6'4", 206, running a 4.42 with production like this. What are we waiting for? Ted Hurst is a combine case where I say this is where you load up the hype now. And it might seem to someone like, oh, you're just doing it because of the combine, though. And no, I'm saying because of his unusually good production, and in the particular event that he posts these particularly good athletic metrics, then this very specific scenario becomes plausible. And I think Nico Collins is such a direct model for what it is.
And his athletic testing graded like pretty much right at where Nico's did. And as far as this model is concerned, like Ted Hurst 74.4 and Nico 73.2. So like right there. So
and they're similar
again,
types, you know.
These are two cases where we love that. So if you're looking for diamonds in the rough, like that's kind of how you do it. So in Hurst's case, I feel like he's definitely more firmly on the radar, and I envision us kind of battling for him in our dynasty rookie drafts that we've got coming up this spring. And then let's look at the other end of that spectrum, where Carnell Tate checks in at 6'2", 192, and runs the 40 that has been much argued about, if you've noticed in big football media. Even it's not like weird guys on Twitter who time their own 40s. It's like Shefty versus Mike Florio versus this guy, and this team scout said that they clocked
the main
him
characters, we call them.
The main characters are even talking about this. It's getting granular. I think it's a clear indication that those guys need free agency really badly to get here, so they can start breaking some news, because now we're getting into Zapruder film 40 time type of stuff. But regardless, what we know about Carnell Tate is that he ran just a little bit north officially of that 4.5 mark. But as we've kind of established on this show, not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I do think, though, it was a disappointing time for Tate, because if I'm going to call a player a blue chip prospect, which is what the pitch has been with Tate, there's been this kind of insistence from the biggest Carnell Tate proponents that you just don't understand. This is a blue chip receiver. This is an alpha number 1 X receiver. You just have to know ball, and you can see it. And I know I'm agnostic on him. I'm not saying he can't be a legitimate wide receiver 1 in the NFL, but to me, blue chip prospects are also blue chip athletes. I am not going to buy I'm going to be skeptical of you as the person giving me this pitch if you tell me he's blue chip and he runs a 4.53, especially a low weight. The 4.53, if it was at 208 or something that he was running that at 6'2", 208, running a 4.53, then I'd say oh, who cares? That's a good sturdy frame. We can work with this. But at 192, he's getting kind of skinny for his height. And I want, if you're skinny for your build, I just kind of feel entitled to, if I'm taking you to the top of 15, you should be fast. That's just how I feel. It's tough to call Tate from here, though, in my opinion, because I think there's a really good reason to believe he is some version of good, and likely an above average starting receiver of some sort in the NFL. But it just irritates me, and it makes me kind of distrustful when people like Lance Zierlein compare Carnell Tate to Chris Olave. It's can someone please make a pitch to me for Carnell Tate that is lucid and makes comparisons that are accurate, and these concerns that I have, can they be addressed specifically? And the only real thing that addresses Tate's otherwise kind of disappointing production is that Jeremiah Smith is completely insane, which is true. I just don't think that Carnell Tate ever showed production at Ohio State that conclusively hinted at wide receiver 1 as opposed to wide receiver 2. And if Carnell Tate turns out to be merely a top 45 receiver in the NFL, that at once would not be bad. There's certainly nothing shameful about that, but the particular price tag that Carnell Tate's loudest advocates were pushing for was something where that would be a disappointing outcome to me. And yet I'm not feeling that. I'm not seeing any tangible reason at this point to just wave off that possibility the way most people do.
Right. I think a lot of people are they came into the combine with their priors. They realize that the 40's not everything, and they just kind of brush everything aside from this past week. And I think like you're saying, the frame detail I think is almost like more concerning than the 40 time, because that is like a tall, lean frame for a guy. So like you said, prefer to have you have some speed to you. And he didn't do the jump, so we don't know what the explosiveness really looks like in the case of Carnell Tate. So,
and John, you know what? Sorry, it's really annoying too that Tate ran that 40, because I bet he's going to run it again at the Ohio State Pro Day, and there it's going to be like 4.38 because they have an insanely fast track there, and it won't matter, because it's like if he just hadn't run at the combine and had ran at the Ohio State Pro Day, I personally would have been skeptical of the number. I would have been like, oh, that's a 4.5. But now it's going to be somehow the most annoying scenario possible, where he runs the 4.53 at the combine and people are like, oh, he's slow, he sucks, which is not true exactly. And then get to the pro day when he's going to run the 4.37 or whatever, and they're like, actually, he was really fast, he just had bad form at the combine. Also not true. Everyone leaves with the possible dumbest takeaways in that case. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
Beautiful. And frankly, it's what we deserve.
But I'll buy Tate. Unless so in like the late 5th round or whatever it was. I don't think in today's best ball ADP environment that's a bad deal. It's like, if anything, it's like if he had proven he's that blue chip player, then he would push for like the 3rd round rather than the 5th. So I think accidentally or not, this kind of like disappointing scenario for Tate was already baked into his ADP a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, because there had been just sort of like a cluster of that top tier of incoming rookie receivers, whether it was Tate, Mekhi Lemon, or Jordan Tyson, all just sort of like going in the,
your next
same
options
range,
are like Sutton. It's not as if you're picking them over some really great pick. It's just kind of just pretty good guys at that point.
Yeah, no one's ever like stoked to have Cortland Sutton, even though he usually ends up, at least returning some level of profit for wherever you end up picking him. But yeah, it's like, yeah, I'd rather like at least like kick the tires on some plausible upside with some of these rookies, because as we've seen in recent years, getting the best rookie receiver will usually vault you fairly far. Don't have to look too far in the past to dig up examples like that. I think that about covers it as far as the combine receivers go. Any other kind of takeaways from the combine outside of the receivers that you wanted to get on the record here?
I guess I should acknowledge that Omar Cooper had a much better 40 time than I expected. His 4.42, I expected it to be more like a 4.57 or something. I still don't care that much. I see people projecting him in the 1st round. I don't doubt that some team, maybe the Bills or something, will take him there. I'm just confident in not getting all worked up about it anyway, because this is a profile that's maybe novel, certainly an entertaining player. The highlights are entertaining with Omar Cooper. It might be a novel, good overall profile for a draft as thin as this one, but we've also seen dozens of Omar Coopers. This is not a compelling prospect profile. And if he's going to be pushing for the 1st round, and if the Dynasty community is going to, the ADP community, the ADP of the fantasy football community in general is going to kind of latch on to that, I'm not going to draft any of them, because I'm sorry, this is like a wide receiver 3 in the NFL. I'll still take Elijah Surratt, no questions asked. Jacoby Lane had a really great combine, actually. I thought he was going to run like a 4.68, or I thought he was going to be like USC Auden Tate or something like that, but he ran a 4.47. And now it's on. Now Jacoby Lane, I think, he's almost as big of a winner as Ted Hurst, if only because of the degree of the contrast between what we thought about Lane and what we now know about him. It changes the complexion of the whole thing. And I'm still pretty skeptical of him as a player, but Casey Concepcion checked in quite a bit bigger than I expected. 6 foot 196. So where I have to kind of retract what I was saying before the combine. I was kind of considering Concepcion and Zachariah Branch the same player, more or less. That's not true. Branch being 5'9", 177, that's a meaningful difference from 6 foot 196. So that's another thing that the combine kind of clarified to me personally.
Yeah, it wasn't the best way in for my guy Zachariah Branch, and I definitely am going to need to to make sure that Lane and KCC are in this sample, just to fill it out further. But good call outs on those guys. Before we get out of here, let's do a little bit more free agent discussion before we roll. So I guess this was more of a trade than a free agent thing, but your instant reactions to the David Montgomery to Houston dealio, like what does that mean for both Montgomery and Woody Marks? And then additionally, what are the Lions going to do with their backfield? Because sort of like you were saying earlier, where not to say it's the exact 1-to-1, but if the Bucs are clearing out the room other than Bucky Irving, like they're going to need someone to take some carries, so we don't have a situation where Irving's getting 350 rushes. Gibbs, I feel like, as awesome as he is, like he's not 300. He's not a Derrick Henry workload guy. So Detroit obviously I think has some work to do in backfilling without Montgomery as well.
Right. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is awesome, but it makes me a little anxious how heavily the Lions have been working him this past year. I'd prefer to see him honestly used more like he was 2 years ago. And it's a little frustrating to me because that's kind of that's the gap. That's the whole difference between Montgomery being cool with playing for the Lions and then demanding this trade, as he may or may not have. It sure kind of seems like he wanted out. And understandably so. David Montgomery is probably overqualified to play as little as he did for the Lions last year. And when that's the reason you're overworking Gibbs, that's kind of a bummer to me if I was a Lions fan. But it shouldn't be that hard for the Lions to replace what Montgomery was giving them. They just were kind of the Lions thought too that he was overqualified. That's how much they value the run game. They're like, yeah, we want an overqualified backup. So with that said, that role was only about a third of the snaps. So a third of your snaps at running back, that's generally easy to account for. I'm not getting my hopes up, in other words, for another big contributor in the Detroit backfield. I assume it's more likely to be like Gibbs and two more people than Gibbs and somebody reaching the exact same height that Montgomery did. So Houston, I think it's pretty simple. Montgomery's the starter, and he could get every bit of the workload that Joe Mixon did when he was on the team and not ATVing or whatever. But Woody Marks is toast, is what I think. Granted,
yeah,
it's a more appropriate role for Woody Marks to be a passing down specialist, and I don't doubt that Woody Marks can unlock some things as a pass catcher that the Texans just couldn't really get going last year. But Woody Marks is not an explosive player. He is not he's a below average pure runner. So he's got to make it all work as a pass catcher. And David Montgomery's a good pass catcher. So it's not as if they need to get Montgomery off the field to clear space or to get returns in the passing game at running back.
Yeah, for me, Marks was like a nice pick last year when he was next to Free. This year with him going more in like the 9th, 10th round, I'm not haven't been quite as attuned to get exposure for risks like Houston trying to bolster its backfield as they should, but with getting a guy like Montgomery, so that this, I feel like
now work
Marks
on the
is
offensive line, Houston, if you could try to remember to do that. It's been a few years.
Instead of just like trading the few guys that you have, it's nuts. I'll throw out one sort of fanfic thing that I think might interest you. Emmanuel Wilson's going to hit free agency. What if the Lions brought him in?
I think that'd be a great call. I guess the one consideration they might need to weigh first is I don't know if these exclusive rights types are. I guess it was a restricted free agent, and they're putting they're putting a no draft pick tender, right? That's what Green Bay is doing. I don't know if in that case, if the Lions sign Wilson, does that count as a qualified free agent departure or whatever the term is for the Green Bay compensatory pick formula? I also don't know if Green Bay has any free agents, so it might be moot point. But the player, I think, is the exact kind of thing that the Lions would have in mind, because rugged 230-pounder, clearly a power specialist. Not that, in my opinion, Wilson can actually be like a starting running back, especially if you don't need him to do it for more than a few weeks at a time or whatever. But his calling card is the power. That's where his strength as a player originates, and it's what the Lions need without Montgomery. It's exactly the complementary trait to Gibbs, who's obviously great, but he doesn't have much more than like anchor power. Like he's not going to push anyone back too much. He can hold his ground pretty good, but he's not really going to knock people back. Wilson might be able to knock some people back, especially if it's the second half and if the defense is getting a little tired. Behind a quality offensive line, Emmanuel Wilson can absolutely be the kind of guy who gives you like 4.5+ yards per carry, even as a power back.
Yeah, just like that tenderizing presence, and you get the defense a little bit beat up, and then Gibbs comes in over the top and has the backbreaking play that ends up helping the Lions get a win, that type of thing. So just playing around with some machinations of
there's a lot of free
potential
agent running backs that are pretty good in my opinion. So it's a weird musical chairs scenario at running back this free agency that I can't really remember happening before, where there's upwards of like 15 players who I'm at the drop of a hat going to be able to say, they're valuable in fantasy now if they land at a certain place, and necessarily there's like 8 or 9 who are going to get frozen out when this shoe drops. But the guy like Emmanuel Wilson, it's like it's normally so easy to miss him in like the broader analysis, but a couple things go a certain way, he could definitely become a factor.
Exactly. So like we may not have like the same top of the free agent class that like the Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs class did a couple years ago. But by that same token, like I feel like this is a really deep one. And I think that additionally, like when we're looking for new guys, new faces in new places, like this rookie running back class, I just think is pretty mediocre.
Busted.
So and it's definitely not deep either. So I think it makes paying attention to where these free agent running backs end up that much more important to your process this draft season. And then let's see. Additionally, it looks like Stephon Diggs is no longer going to be with the Patriots.
Right.
And quarterback stuff with Malik Willis and Kyler Murray. So any thoughts on those three before we roll out?
I love Malik Willis. I support him as a free agency expenditure in a way that I normally wouldn't for like immediate. Like I'm not a fan of Ty Simpson going in the first round, but the idea of Malik Willis getting an irresponsible contract, I am in favor of, in part for just the chaos, I guess. And I don't know. I just think Willis kind of has had a raw deal to this point. In hindsight, with how well he played for the Packers, it's like, why did he get discarded by the Titans for Will Levis of all people? Will Levis? That's why you're closing the door on this guy. And now, like, look, just it's kind of crazy how many teams like Titans, how badly they manage it. You'd say like, surely this must be the worst thing anyone has done in the past few years. And it's like there's a lot of teams like this. It's crazy. But yeah, I think the Kyler Murray stuff is complicated. The baseball stuff, I have no idea what to make. I kind of hope for our drafting purposes, for our projections and analysis purposes, I hope they kind of close the door on that as soon as possible, because I don't want to have to worry about my quarterback 2 playing baseball this year instead. I don't want that. So if they could kind of nip that in the bud, that'd be great. Beyond that, it's of course still weird with Kyler, even if we had that assurance that like, yeah, baseball's not a thing. It's like, okay, now we just have the 7 or 8 other really big issues to have to account for. I don't think Kyler Murray's a bad quarterback, but I really do think there's a valid point to be made that even if he's a pretty good quarterback, it's fair for a team to just say like, we still don't want him. We just don't want him in our locker room. I'm not even really seizing so much on like the Call of Duty thing. Maybe that's the start and the end of it. Maybe that's the whole thing. I don't know. But it doesn't seem like Kyler Murray wants to lead a team. He doesn't seem competitive that way. He doesn't seem to take personal offense to his team playing poorly. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of see that he comes off as selfish and like not a great teammate, because it might be a fair accusation. Maybe he really does just care about like his own stats and he's like not invested in the game beyond that. It's possible. And it seems like some significant number of people are suspecting the same thing. And you see the way the Cardinals dispense with him. It's kind of, it adds to the suspicion. It's like it felt like no culture loss at all to get rid of this guy at a position that teams are normally so loath to ever cut anybody, So if Mike McDaniel had not been fired as the Dolphins, I would have said that would have been the perfect spot for Kyler Murray, because I think it takes tinkering with an offense and a lot of accommodation to put an offense in place that really suits Kyler Murray. I think, to be fair to Kyler, Drew Petzing's system in Arizona did not do that at all. As we saw, it looked like a system more designed for Jacoby Brissett than Kyler Murray. And as much as it's kind of, it shows severe limitations in Kyler's game that was the case at all. It's also like, well, why didn't you just make it more of a Kyler Murray off? Like, Mike McDaniel is the kind of guy he has enough like a squirrely brain that he'd get like a lot of stuff moving around in a way that kind of put Kyler Murray in a playmaking position. But if some team just tries to sign Kyler Murray to make him run like a Norv Turner offense or whatever, it's like, what's even the point by now?
Yeah, who knows what the Dolphins are going to end up doing. Obviously, it looks like Tua's not going to be there. I don't know. I feel like there's a case to be made for them to just like see if Quinn Ewers is anything, and then if not, you get access to one of the best quarterbacks in next year's class. Always a risky proposition, but
yeah,
I don't know.
There might never be a good quarterback prospect again after,
because of the 7-on-7 stuff you were talking about.
7-on-7 culture. 26-year-old, like everybody's a Chris Winkie now.
Yeah,
it's just out of hand. It's where has my culture gone?
It's culture gone, man. It's tough out there. So yeah, specking on quarterback classes is oftentimes a fool's errand. I think if we were like looking a year ago at this year, we'd be like, oh yeah, just screw 2025 and just get ready to load up on quarterbacks in 2026. And yeah, that's obviously not the case. We might get 2 first-round quarterbacks this year, and yeah, that's kind of where we're at with things. So I think that's going to do it for us on this episode of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, you can check us out for all of our on-site content at rotowire.com. Go ahead and use that code YouTube15 to get 15% off any subscription to RotoWire. Going to be super helpful again to you during this baseball draft season. We've got tons of off-season NFL content between Mario and myself and the rest of our NFL staff and every other sport. DFS, if you're playing basketball, if you like bracketology, our college basketball guys are super sharp. If you like soccer, I mean, literally any sport, we've got an awesome department that is giving tons of quality content. So definitely worth your while. Go check out RotoWire at using that code YouTube15 to get yourself 15% off. Big thanks to our presenting sponsor over at DraftKings. But that's going to do it for us here. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.